The pilot is Randy Schlitter of Hays, Kansas. The plane is the S-12XL, powered by a Rotax 912, driving a 3-bladed warp drive prop with nickel edges. The floats are Puddle jumper with 1,200 pounds of displacement per float. It's amphibious and it's a fiberglass construction.
Well, mounting the S-12XL on floats is a pretty nice package kit now that we've tested it and got full technical instructions, drawings, and we have some experience firsthand with it. So I'm pretty pleased with the mount. It seems like any float plane, as in any float plane, it's always a little rougher feeling and taking a real pounding. But out here where we get a lot of wind and we get a lot of wave action, it's hung in there all summer. So we're happy with the way the system, the mounting's held up.
Prior to the Puddle jumpers, S-12s have been equipped with full lotus floats. Although the full lotus provide an adequate straight float, they were slow to get off the water, but retained good rates of climb. By contrast, the Puddle jumpers are quick, leaving the water in 12 seconds solo and 20 seconds at gross. Climb rates are predictably less due to the added weight, but acceptable 300 feet per minute with heavy loads on a hot day.
Well, we first tried the 12 on the full lotus floats, and it was an all right system, but it was quite the carnival because we had a dolly system. Actually put the plane on a dolly, and we would roll it out of the hangar on the dolly, take it out on the runway, and take it off. And just before we lifted off, we would aim the airplane a little off to the runway and shoot the dolly off between the runway lights, and come back and land on the grass.
Docking the S-12XL has the advantage of the prop in the rear. A pilot can quickly exit the seat and go forward to the floats to receive the dock. A favorite docking method was to drop the wheel and taxi ashore. This avoids wear and tear on the floats from wave action.
Docking the plane proved to be real easy, whether you were coming up to like a dock. But my favorite way was to just drop the gear and drive her up on the beach. And boy, that really got people interested. The campers would come over and take a look at it. And it was a great way to meet people, give a few rides, spread the good news about float planes. And of course, is also the safest way for us to store our plane overnight when we were at the lake because of the winds come up and it keeps the plane out of the wave action.
Throughout the summer, we tested the light seaplane in search of weak points. The retraction system failed to extend the nose gear 2 times and once on the left main. Landing on grass with gear up caused no harm, but we did learn that keeping down locks lubricated with silicone or WD-40 prevented the problem.
It wasn't a perfectly flawless summer. We did have some retraction system problems, but that's what we were there for, to find out what the weak spots were in the system. And one evening in particular, the left main wouldn't go down, so I made the decision to go ahead and land gear up, which float plane on the grass is no problem. You just go ahead and make your gear up landing, try to get her down slow and smooth. And what was kind of unique and nice with this system, I went ahead and just left the compressor running and put the down gear valve on and just went around the plane, lifting the plane up at various places and let the gear come down. And no big deal, just let the gear pop down and taxied her back to the hangar.
In the air, the S-12XL retained a light roll and easy coordination. The plane also provides itself a capable training platform, rugged enough to accept less than perfect landings. Even without water rudder, handling was equal to the Coyote 2 and Courier. Operations were conducted in a variety of water conditions, the most severe being 3-foot whitecaps in 20-mile-per-hour winds.
We had some concerns about the water handling, how stable it would be, how good it would be docking and sailing. And I was quite happy with it. My previous experience was with the S6s, and of course those are a dream to dock and to handle. I was apprehensive, especially with the sailing the S-12 backwards, because of the fact the engine's back there and you get going pretty good. Well, who knows? But we were really happily surprised this summer at the lake because we get some pretty good winds, and I got some pretty good speed backwards, and she was a stable boat.
By the summer's end, we had a very viable seaplane in the S-12XL. The only real downside is cruise speed. With a prop pitched for climb, 65 miles per hour was the typical. The partially enclosed S-12XL makes a great warm weather seaplane for short-haul flights. The short takeoff performance is handy, but the slow cruise speed and low climb rates could limit the range of operations.
Overall, I'd say the performance, I was impressed with the aircraft because it was very quick getting out of the water, very maneuverable in the air. It didn't lose much to having the floats attached. The handling was still great. I felt like the 12, I could drop it in tiny little lagoons and coves.
The amphib system was without problem once we were on the degree of lubrication required. On the wheels, the S-12XL steers best with some coaxing with the single front brake. The fun factor of this machine is intense. It'll be a long winter for those of us at Rand's who had the chance to try out our water wings. To help spring come early, a full enclosure may be added to test the effects and advantages.
The Rand's S-12, equipped with puddle jumper amphibious floats and our pneumatic-powered retraction system, becomes one of the most versatile sports machines in the air. With the ability to operate from both land and sea, your access to landing sites increase many-fold. The system features push-button operation using pneumatic cylinders. The advantages of pneumatics is durability in corrosive environments, high operational life, lightweight, and unlimited air reservoir. Let's take a closer look at the S-12 puddle jumper float system as provided by Rand's Company.
I want to point out some of the features of the aircraft for you. This, of course, is main gear, and it retracts vertically by action of this pneumatic air cylinder. Now, before that can retract, it has to have this small cylinder move the lock out of the way. Now, this is done by pushing two buttons inside the cockpit. In other words, we've gotten this down to just a real simple two-button procedure. You got this button for the lock and this button for the gear. Now, up on the dash is a pressure gauge, and you have to have a minimum of 80 pounds. This switch fires the air compressor, and it'll pump and shut off at 120 pounds. So, provided you have the proper pressure, which is stored in a small tank behind the seat, right down here, and I might add the system is very tight with very few leaks. It'll hold air for several days. And you should always start off your journey with an air charge. If you haven't charged it up, you can always use this and charge up your system. Anyway, back to the controls. To actuate it, you would simply pull up on this one to release the lock, then pull up on this button to retract the gear, and then push back down on the forward button to lock the gear in the up position. Now, to cycle the gear down, we again pull up on the lock, then this button at that time, which would be up, is pushed down, and then we push down the lock button, and then the gear has been successfully cycled. Now, to verify if your gear are up or down, one can observe the landing gear in the position that it is down, and we'll show you later. We'll do a dry retraction test after we block the plane up on how the gear look when they're retracted, so you can visually check this when you're flying. And I'm able to check it both sides and the nose gear simply by looking over the side of the plane and seeing if the gear are actually in the position they need to be. Now let's walk around a little bit and we'll look at the nose gear and try to understand it. The nose gear, of course, is steerable and has a brake on it. This brake lever is attached to the flap handle. The nose gear features a simple locking mechanism working against this cylinder here that releases this and it goes up, and the wheel will be out here somewhere. This is operated by a small pneumatic cylinder. This cable attaches to the large pneumatic cylinder that's up on the strut. That is the biggest cylinder in the entire system and requires the most air pressure. If anything is going to go wrong, your nose gear will, because it requires most of the pressure. When that cylinder goes off, it pulls on this point, pulling the gear up after the lock has been released. So she'll be straight out. Real simple and rugged. The steering system just simply loosens up and folds back with it. Okay, how to operate these landing gears? Very simple. You have to have power on. As we talked about earlier, you have to have a minimum of pressure in the system, and we like to see 80 pounds. Up on the panel, here's a gauge. Now, if you flip on the compressor, right here, a light comes on when the switch is flipped up. That compressor will run until it has 120 pounds, then it'll kick it off if you forget. I prefer that you remember to shut it off just prior to 120 pounds. Okay. Now, down here are two buttons. These control the retraction of the gear. Now, right now, the plane is blocked up off the ground, and we are in the down and gear lock position. Okay, now I'm going to raise the gear, and this is how you fly this airplane, or how you operate the gear on this aircraft if you want to come in for a water landing or a gear up landing on land if you desire to do so. Now, first step is the forward button is the lock button. The rear button is the gear button. That's very important to remember that. The gear will not go anywhere unless this button has the up locks released. Okay, to do so, we pull up on it. Now the locks are released and they're held out of the way by air pressure. At this point, we pull up on this and the gear come up. Now we lock the gear in the up lock position. At that point, there's no air being used by the system, but if you listened closely, there was a hiss. When we have these systems being held up or open, there will be a loss of air. So the quicker you cycle these buttons, the less air losses there will be. Now we're going to bring the gear down. Okay, we check our gauge. We have plus 80 pounds. Good. That means they'll come down successfully. Just as a word for emergencies, if you do have less than 80 on a down cycle, it's possible it'll still work. Static tests show that this system will work even down at 60, but that's not known if it'll do so in the air at those pressures. Okay, we're ready to cycle the gear down. Up locks, down, lock. See how fast it can be done. All right? Now we're down around 80 pounds. Let's cycle one more. We're going to come up, lock. Okay? Lock, down, lock. That's how fast it can happen. Okay, before you go flying, it's a good idea to make sure that your air reservoir has plenty of charge in it. And a simple way of doing it is making use of this air coupling. Now to do it, you turn on, first you turn this, plug this in, which is hooked directly to the compressor, then you turn on the valve, and that'll fill up your air tank. And you can look up on the air gauge and you'll see it rise up. Now we got about 85 pounds. Okay, and that's about what we're showing in the tank, so that's all you're going to get. And that's simple as that. Your air reservoir is filled. Now you can go fly. The RANS S-12 as a seaplane needs some special attention, poor ground handling to assure it's not damaged. When the airplane's at rest, it'll sit down on the skid of the rear of the floats. That's a perfectly normal position. If you want, you can put sandbags on the bows of the floats to where the airplane will rest level. This makes it a little less difficult to handle, and it might be the way you want it in your hangar if you have other planes. But in this case, we're just going to move this airplane by picking up the tail, much like you would a tail dragger, and move it into position where you want. I believe if you do it this way, you'll have a lot less problems than try to steer it by the nose gear. The nose gear doesn't want to track very well unless you'd put a tow bar on it.
So now that we've had a good close look at the RANS puddle jumper system, It's easy to understand how with simple push-button operation, one can raise and lower the gear. This ease of operation enhances the safety factor of operating a seaplane. Without the array of cranks, wrenches, or levers to pull, the float operator can concentrate on his flying and enjoy the experience of float flying. The puddle jumper system on the RANS S-12 is easily maneuvered on the water. Turns solely by the air rudder are possible in moderate conditions, as demonstrated here in moderate 10 to 15 mile-per-hour winds on a small pond. Addition of water rudders would further enhance water maneuverability and is recommended if tighter maneuvering is crucial to your operations. The S-12, in combination with our float adapter kit, pneumatic retraction system, and the puddle jumper floats, becomes a viable, practical seaplane.